Hello and welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. Today we are starting to work from a brand new to us cookbook, relatively new. I think it came out last year sometime. And this is from Vivian Howard, the same author of Deep Run Roots, which we've worked from a lot. But this is called This Will Make It Taste Good. And so, see, this is her book. I've had this for a while and haven't actually cooked anything out of it, but I turned to one of the recipes and decided I really wanted to make it. And so we have to make another recipe before we make that, because this book is a little bit different than Deep Run Roots. It is a number of sort of base flavoring recipes that you don't necessarily eat on their own, but you use them for sort of flavor boosters, I think she calls them, in other recipes. So it sort of helps you get other recipes done quicker by having these already made, or helps you sort of elevate a standard weeknight meal by adding something with a lot of flavor that you've already got made and in the refrigerator. So the first thing that we are going to be making, she calls R-rated onions. And these are basically just very well caramelized onions. So the good thing about this is they will last in the refrigerator, I think she says, for a week. So you could keep these in the refrigerator for a week, but she freezes them in these large ice cube trays, like for cocktail ice cubes. We have some of those and I've used them for a while now, but she freezes them in about half cup portions, which is what one of those large freezer ice cube trays usually holds, or at least that's what mine holds. When it's full to the max, it's about half cup. So that's my plan for whatever I have left over when I'm done with this, because caramelized onions take a really long time. So a big beef I have with a lot of recipes is that they will basically tell you you can caramelize onions in 15 minutes. That you can caramelize a small, like less than an onion or an onion's worth of onions. You can get that done in 15 minutes. Now, whenever I try to do that, I end up with dried out, too brown, not lovely, sumptuous, sweet caramelized onions that I'm expecting. They're just not right. And so this recipe makes a lot. I think she doesn't say exactly how many it makes, but the point is that you make, she says it makes 2 cups. You start with a lot of onions. Let me show you. These are the onions that I'm going to be caramelizing today. This is a very large bowl of onions. It's not my biggest bowl, but it's probably the second biggest of this shape that I have. And it is full to the brim. And these are sliced sort of kind of thinly. They're not super uniformly sliced because I didn't stress about that too much. Just you want them sliced thinly, long ways. So from the root end to the stem end, if that's what you want to call it, whatever, the part where the green onion comes out, you slice them thinly that way. And this is a lot of onions. She says you cannot make this with a smaller amount of onions. Do not try to make this in a small batch. You need all of this to create the steam that will initially soften them, and then the insulation to keep them from burning. So you need to make a big batch. So this is supposed to cook down to about 2 cups. I wouldn't worry about exactly the right amount of onions. As long as you have a lot, it'll be fine. Like 1 less, 1 more. I mean, like her measurements are all this 4 to 5, 6 to 8, depending on the size. So you just want a lot of onions for this. And all we need besides this is a little bit of oil and a little bit of salt and a lot of thyme. Thyme as in on the clock, not the herb. So we'll meet you at the stove in just a minute to get these started. So I have the largest skillet I have that I have a lid for because the lid is very important. And I would assume this deep skillet is the best. You don't want the sort of thinner fry pans because this will hold more. I've got a little bit of oil that I measured. I'm using my usual sort of olive oil that I cook with, and it's starting to get hot, so I'm going to put these in there. Oh my goodness. It was heating over medium-high heat. Let me rescue a few. I'm just putting all of these in here, even though it is too, I mean, looks like it's way too many, but they're going to cook down a lot. All right. That's good. And now we're going to add just a little bit of salt. All right. So we're going to let these sit for a couple of minutes. So I'm not stirring them down to the bottom right now. I'm just sort of making sure they all won't go flying out when I start to stir. So I'm going to let that sit for a couple minutes before I touch them. That's hard for me. It's been a couple of minutes. Busied myself so I wouldn't touch them. Now we're going to start to stir them. And I don't remember if I had the chance to say because it was getting really hot, but it was at medium-high heat. And we're keeping it at medium-high heat for right now. All right. So that's sort of a start. And we're going to now let it sit for about another 3 minutes before we touch it again. Been about 3 minutes. So I'm going to stir this again. They wilted a little bit more. And now is going to be the hard part. So because now I'm supposed to not touch it. So I'm going to turn the heat down to medium-low. Put the lid on and come back every few minutes to stir it and put the lid back on for about 45 minutes. So I'm gonna set a timer so I don't forget. She says, don't go take a walk, don't leave it because you don't want it to burn in there. You do want to check on it every so often. But we don't want to keep taking the lid off and stirring and keep taking the lid off and stirring. So, I'll be back in about 5 minutes. After the first 5 minutes, I'm just going to take it off and stir. Got a lot of water in there, well, juice. No water added, so it's whatever came out of the onions themselves, which is kind of the point of keeping the lid on and cooking them in their own steam. So, another 5 minutes. All right, 10 minutes in. By the way, she doesn't say every 5 minutes. That was just my deciding that's a good interval. So, all right, third 5 minutes. Starting to get a little warm on the lid. another 5 minutes. All right, fourth set of 5 minutes. They're still really watery, but that will go away once we leave the lid off, which will happen, but not for quite a while. We're getting these, I think our aim is to cook these until they're translucent and maybe a little bit brown. We'll see. 5 more minutes. Okay, I think this is the 6th time, so a little bit more left. I think they're almost all cooked at this point. Almost. I think just 2 more of these. So very, very wet, but almost cooked through. So another 5 minutes. Okay, so after this one we have 5 more minutes. So I mean, I think this is what we're going for. We're just going for cooking them. She said when we're done, they should be a light caramel color. They're kind of yellowy. But they will definitely darken up as the liquid evaporates when we leave the lid off after the next 5 minutes. So, okay, this is the last time. It's been about 45 minutes and it is still very wet and very light, but we're gonna leave the lid off. We're gonna leave it at medium-low heat, and we have to be much more careful at this point. We have to stir it more often. We have to not go away. So, see how this goes, see how long this takes. Doesn't really give an indication of how long this will be, so we'll see. It's been 15 minutes and they are still very wet. I'm gonna turn my heat up just a tad, but I have a feeling we're gonna be here for a while. We are at half an hour after we took off the lid and we still have quite a bit of liquid in there. So we're gonna keep cooking it. All right, this is just driving me crazy. I'm gonna turn the heat up to medium, get the liquid off, but I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna watch it real good. We are approaching an hour after I took off the lid and we are still pretty moist. On this episode of Cooking the Books with Heather, you watched me make R-rated onions, caramelized onions, from Vivian Howard's newer cookbook, This Will Make It Taste Good. So, we followed the recipe as closely as we could, but oh my goodness, it took forever. So, I think all told, I was working on this for like more than 3 hours, which is kind of crazy. And mine ended up making a little bit less than the recipe is supposed to. So I feel like they cooked down more than they really should have. But there's a point in here where, you know, so you cook them, you basically try to cook them through with the lid on, and you get a lot of liquid. And then you take the lid off, but she tells you to turn the heat down, I think. Anyway, at some point she tells you to turn the heat down. It's been a while since I actually made this, but she tells you to turn the heat down and she never tells you to turn it back up. And mine were just not browning hardly at all. It took a long time for all of the liquid that the onions released to actually boil off, and then for them to start to brown. At the end, I'm pretty sure I did turn it up more than she said to. So I think I would probably do that. I think the cooking it with the lid on to sort of get them started cooking so they don't immediately burn is probably a great idea. But at least for me, with my pan and on my stove, there was no way that this was gonna take any less than that if I followed the instructions exactly. So that said, I do often complain that most recipes tell you you can caramelize onions in like 20 minutes and it just doesn't work. So I do believe there's a medium point here between 20 minutes and 3 hours, but I haven't found it yet. But the end result was nicely caramelized, but I think it was a little bit more of sort of a single mass, sort of a pasty thing than I think it should have been. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure I will make this particular recipe again because I found another one to try from another book. So hopefully we'll have that here soon. But we didn't try these on their own, but we did use them for another recipe. And we'll let you know what we thought of that in that video. And if you enjoyed watching me make this, give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and come back and watch me make something else.